being famous. What do we want from our influencers? Nowadays, it seems like there are influencers for every category under the moon, right? From books to motherhood, sports and cooking, no matter what category I name, there's probably someone online making content about it. But some of the earliest influencers were simply famous for being famous. They weren't necessarily sharing a skill, or they didn't have a specific knowledge base that they were sharing with an audience. They were just famous. So famous for being famous, that's how a lot of people would describe Paris Hilton. Hilton had mastered the art of personal branding. When I say her name, certain imagery comes to mind. For me, I think of blonde hair, little dogs, glittery skirts, camera flashes, parties, and fun and money. In 2001, she was labeled New York's leading it girl. She represented this idea of being unapologetically yourself, and people seemed to resonate with that, no matter how out of reach her lifestyle actually was for the average person. But she gave us an all-access pass to her life, and people ate it up. It was a life that many of us only dream of. People were obsessed. So right now I'm currently reading this book called Extremely Online by Taylor Lorenz, and she has a chapter on this woman named Julia Allison. I had never heard of her before, but after reading the chapter and doing some additional digging, I learned that she's actually credited with pioneering personal branding through online platforms. So like Hilton before her, Allison understood how important it is to have a brand and a persona. So in 2002, Julia Allison was attending Georgetown University. While there, she wrote a sex column called Sex on the Hilltop, inspired by, Carrie Bradshaw's Sex and the City. This was a big deal because Georgetown is a Catholic university and there had never been a sex column there before. Its popularity grew, especially as she wrote about her relationship with a young congressman. So soon her work was being published in Cosmopolitan and 17, and she kind of was growing this online community. So after college, she moves to New York City and she's ready to become a full-time journalist, but she has little to no luck. But she decided that she was gonna do whatever it took to get her name out there. And one of her big goals for moving to New York was to become a cult figure. She literally wrote that down in one of her journals. She wanted to be somebody and she wanted to get her work read. And so she kind of started to shamelessly self-promote herself. She would comment on online articles, links to her own work. She would fill out tip lines with links to her own work on online platforms. She was constantly commenting and pushing for herself and her work to be read. And soon she started to be everywhere, right? She was auditioning for reality shows. She was one of Tumblr's earliest embracers and was posting frequently about what she was wearing, what she was eating, the yummiest eats, her dating life, just her entire lifestyle, right? And she started to kind of create this brand for herself online. Now, a lot of legacy media companies in New York called her out. They called her shameless. They said she was trying too hard. They didn't like her methods. It was going against everything that these old white men had been working for, and here comes this young woman publicly promoting her work and herself in a way that hadn't really been done before. And she did receive a lot of criticism because this was a world that didn't even really understand the internet yet. Influencers were not a thing. They were very confused by her methods, and it really didn't go over well. But despite all of that, it ended up working out because she started getting invited to events. She's invited to New York Fashion Week, and she's taking her followers on Tumblr and on her blog along with her and sharing backstage access that, the average person is never gonna get to go to New York Fashion Week. And so she's showing you what it's like through these online platforms, right? She ends up in a Sony campaign with Peyton Manning and Justin Timberlake. She ends up starring in one season of a Bravo reality show. All of her work promoting herself and creating this online brand definitely paid off. But why did people like her if she was so openly campaigning for herself? Well, the reason is because she let her followers in on her secrets. From her dating life to behind the scenes at popular events like New York Fashion Week, she was giving people, just like Paris Hilton, an all-access pass to her life in this world that was typically unattainable, right? People are getting to see behind the curtain in New York City, and they're seeing a world that had previously been closed off to them. People wanted to see more of her life and adventures. She was an influencer before the term influencer was even a thing. And what was so unique about Julia Allison is that she was probably the first influencer to make it big without already coming from a world of fame and fortune. Paris Hilton, extremely wealthy. That's part of her brand. And Julia Allison didn't come from a family of gazillionaires and was able to make it big and kind of create this micro celebrity of herself without already having the resources and the money to do so. And so that's really important when we think about modern influencers, right? I will put a link in the description to an article about her written by the author of the book that I'm reading if you want to know more about Julia Allison and her journey. So now we're going to jump to Kim Kardashian. And Kim Kardashian was once Paris Hilton's assistant, but in 2007, she, enters the public scene. We know why, unfortunately. So the Kardashians used to be everywhere, and they still are, but in a very, very different way. In like the late 2000s, early 2010s, the Kardashians were literally everywhere, whether that's a Skechers ad, or a weight loss ad, alcohol brands, clothing brands, Sears. They had a Sears clothing line. Like, they were everywhere, and they were taking whatever brand deal or partnership they could get. Say what you will about the Kardashians as people, and I'm a Swiftie, so don't get me started, but we have to give it to them. They know smart business. They knew what they were doing. They are a perfect definition of the mere exposure effect. We liked them because they were everywhere. And because they came from a world of glitz and glamour, they were more fun to watch. Again, their life seemed unattainable, and that's why people liked them. We can watch something play out that we'll probably never get to experience. Why not spend our evening watching the Kardashians take a vacation to Bora Bora and Kim search for her diamond earring in the ocean? And with the more fame that the Kardashians amassed, it seemed more and more okay for them to flaunt their wealth, and it kind of justified their lifestyle. If people like what we're doing, if people are gonna watch it, we're gonna keep doing it. So just like Julia Allison, the Kardashians used tactics of shameless self-promoting, right? They're going after everything, they're putting themselves everywhere. And today, I would say self-promoting is more socially acceptable. When you see someone comment on a TikTok, oh, you should check out my work, or they're posting, TikToks, oh, check out this song I wrote. While some people might deem it cringy, it's definitely more accepted and prevalent than it used to be back when like Julia Allison was doing it. I mean, look at Addison Rae, for example. In the 2020 TikTok craze, she was posting 7 to 8 times a day, sometimes even more. And it paid off because now she's a pop star touring the world. People said that they liked Addison Rae's early content because it was relatable and fun. But is she still relatable today? Are influencers relatable at all? Or are they like Paris Hilton, Julia Allison, and Kim Kardashian, exposing us to a world that we can only dream of? They're letting us in on this life that we'll only ever be able to see through a screen. So let's look at Alex Earle. She comes from a world of money. According to the Post, Alex Earle's father makes around $24 million per year. And she went to a private school that cost about $16K per year for tuition. Totally relatable, right? But she'd like you to think that. And her money keeps on breaking up, right? How could any of us ever relate to this? But Alex Earle wants us to think that we can. She's silly and goofy and quirky just like us. She also has anxiety and struggles. She's just also insanely wealthy. No big deal. People can't seem to get enough of her though. She's on Dancing with the Stars now. She's dating an NFL player. She's everywhere. And becoming an influencer seems to allow these already wealthy women to vindicate their spending habits. And this leads me right back to where we started. Paris Hilton. It seems to be entertaining for us to watch the lives of the rich and the famous. So what do we want from influencers? Do we want to watch their rich, glamorous lives knowing that we'll probably never have that? Is that actually fun for us? There's a reason that shows like Real Housewives and Keeping Up with the Kardashians are as popular as they are. It's unattainable, it's drama, it's fantasy, it's simply fiction for the majority of the world. I know that when I watch those shows, I get really irritated. I start to feel bad about myself from the way that I look to the amount of money I have in my bank account. I question why I can't just lock in and eat healthier and work out like they do so that I can finally be thin enough. And then my frustration turns to the world that we've inherited. How is someone able to drop $40K on a 2-year-old's birthday party? In what world is that socially acceptable? But there is a world where it is. Why wasn't I born into a billionaire's family? Like, how is that fair? And since the history of time, there's been this divide between the rich and the poor, right? It's nothing new. But it's 2025. You'd think we would have solved some of the issues by now, right? But instead, we're watching the class divide grow wider and wider in real time through a phone screen. And we just let the bitterness and jealousy seep into our souls. Why couldn't that be me? If I would have renegaded a little bit harder in 2020, maybe I would be hanging out with Jake Shane and doing Pilates with Tate McRae. So what do we want now? That's the big question. Do we still want influencers with glamorous lives? I see comments on Christmas haul videos that are like, if it starts with, I'm so grateful I'm not bragging, you just know it's gonna be good. Because we still love hauls and house tours. We still launch people like Alex Earl to life-altering fame. We still want to see enormous amounts of wealth and the life that comes with it. But then at the same time, I see things like hashtag slow living, hashtag soft life, hashtag cozy at home trending. There seems to be a descent towards the simple, the comfortable, the chill. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, it does say a lot about where we're at as a society. On the one hand, we're frustrated with billionaires. I get it, it's 2025. Billionaires shouldn't really exist, right? Like, tax the rich. So these billionaires still exist, they're flaunting their wealth. Meanwhile, people in our country can't afford food or life-saving medical treatment. So maybe we do want to see simpler influencers. We want to see teachers preparing their classroom for a new school year, bakers decorating a custom cake for a birthday, a farmer feeding her sheep before the sun comes up. Maybe we want to watch things that are a little bit more attainable. I personally love reading vlogs and a day in my life of a 24-year-old grad student kind of videos. I don't necessarily want to watch the day in the life of someone who drives a fancy car home to their mansion. But then on the other hand, slow living content seems to be a slippery slope straight down to trad wife conservatism. Why are we at home drinking mocktails instead of at the club downing a cocktail? Why are we prioritizing self-care nights instead of girls' night out? Some might say it's because we're all burnt out and mentally exhausted in this current political and economic climate we've got going on. But it also could be because purity culture is on the rise. I've seen TikToks telling me how to secure a wealthy husband. I've seen compilation videos of what I cook for my man in a week. I've seen pack my husband's lunch with me videos. This type of content seems to glorify being a stay-at-home wife, cleverly disguised as soft living. To each their own, do what makes you happy. That's the point of, feminism. Everybody can choose what they want to do. However, like I said, it's a slippery slope. Do we really need to romanticize the idea of marriage, kids, and submitting to your husband in the year 2025? Do we really need to teach young girls online that they should be playing into gender roles and catering to the male gaze? Tradwife influencer content, like Nara Smith and Jasmine, they continue to see engagement and growth. And thus, we've allowed this subculture to amass wealth. There's a lot of money behind slow living and tradwife content. And it concerns me a bit, this rise of communities like Mom Talk even, for example, because they're secretly pushing out conservative ideals and it's seeping into our everyday culture. It's seeping into other realms like Dancing with the Stars. So it's fine to want slow living. It's fine to want to connect with nature and chill out and journal and stay at home and be cozy. But we need to be analyzing our why. Why is that on the rise right now? What about our political climate is allowing that type of rhetoric to thrive? And I'm just wondering if we're seeing the death of a party girl and the rise of a trad wife in real time. So this leads me to my overarching question. What do we want from our influencers? Do we want to see an unattainable, glamorous life? Be given backstage access to New York Fashion Week? See what it's like to go on a shopping spree without worrying about how much things cost? Or do we want to see cooking videos, sourdough tips, videos on how to secure a man, tips on parenting? I'm sure the answer for each person is different. After all, the cool thing about social media is that it allows you to connect with the community to find your people. We just need to make sure that we're paying attention to how said community is affecting our ideology, self-talk, and behaviors. We need to pay attention to which brands are partnering with which influencers, where is the money going and why, because at the end of the day, it's us viewers who have power, right? We have the power to shape our own digital landscape. We have the power to launch someone to fame while canceling another, and we have the power to call out harmful partnerships and ideology being presented on social media. So yeah, what do we want from our influencers?